Hello, my name is Cheryl, and I'm a Broward County librarian. Please join me today as I present and recommend two books which I recently read, which may interest you. The first book is entitled The Personal Librarian, and it was written by attorney and best-selling historical fiction author Marie Benedict and best-selling contemporary fiction author Victoria Christopher Murray. The second book, which I'm going to recommend to you today, is entitled The Woman Who Stole Vermeer, and it was written by Anthony Amore, an author, security expert, and director of security and chief investigator at the world-renowned Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, Massachusetts. Both books are available in various formats from Broward County Library. While The Personal Librarian is a fictionalized account of a real woman's life, The Woman Who Stole Vermeer is a nonfiction biography about a real woman who lived during the 20th century. While both books are different in terms of how their authors approach their subjects, they have many similar features. For example, both books are about intelligent and passionate women who lived out of the ordinary, very distinctive lives. And both books bring the lost story about these real women to readers' attention. Let me tell you a little bit more about the protagonists and why I recommend reading these two books. In the New York Times best-selling Personal Librarian, the authors Benedict and Murray retell the early life of Belle de Costa Green, the African-American librarian who once was known for developing and managing the personal library of one of the most powerful early 20th century financiers, John Pierpont Morgan. Belle de Costa Green became J.P. Morgan's personal librarian during a time in United States history when there was tremendous discrimination and violence directed against African Americans, and most women did not pursue professional careers outside their homes. Belle de Costa Green's story is quite extraordinary. Not only did she hide a fundamental aspect of her identity, her race, from most, if not all, the people with whom she worked and interacted, she also tested many of the cultural and gender norms that existed. She would go on to become very well known, and her work became recognized nationally and internationally. So who was Belle de Costa Green? Born Belle Marion Greener on the 26th of November, 1879, in a Black Washington, D.C. neighborhood, Belle Greener was the third of five surviving children of Richard Theodore Greener and Genevieve Ida Fleet, both of whom were light-skinned African Americans who came from mixed-race families. Belle Greener's father had distinguished himself as the first Black man to graduate from Harvard University in 1870. Afterwards, he pursued a law degree, and then he became dean of Howard University Law School in Washington, D.C. Belle Greener's mother came from a family of educated, successful, and musically inclined African Americans. In 1885, when Belle Greener was 6 years old, Richard Greener moved his growing family to New York City, where he worked as a civil servant and served as secretary of the Ulysses S. Grant Monument. Belle Greener's father, who had been the first Black librarian at the University of South Carolina and was an avid book lover, likely fostered his daughter's interest in rare books and helped her develop her studies. By the time Belle Greener was 12 years old, she knew she wanted to work with rare books. Around the time that Belle Greener was 19 years old, Richard Greener and Genevieve Greener separated, and Belle Green's mother began to pass with her children. Passing may be defined as the ability of a person to be regarded as a member of an identity group or category often different from their own. Passing may result in privileges, rewards, and increased in social acceptance, or it may be used to cope with the stigma. As part of the process of passing, Genevieve Greener and her children changed their last name to Green by dropping the R on Greener, and Genevieve Greener also would change her maiden name to Van Fleet in an effort to assume Dutch ancestry. Belle Green also would change her name a second time, this time swapping out her middle name, Marion, for da Costa and identifying with the fabricated maternal grandmother of Portuguese descent. Da Costa means of the coast and implied borders between land and sea, fact and fiction, black and white, wealth and poverty. In 1902, after she graduated from high school, Bella da Costa Green went to work as a clerk at the Princeton University Library, where she served an apprenticeship in the cataloging and reference departments, and likely was mentored by Ernest C. Richardson, the university librarian and professor of bibliography. At Princeton University Library, Belle da Costa Green also came to the attention of Junius Spencer Morgan, a Princeton University student, collector of manuscripts and rare books, and the nephew of John Pierpont Morgan. As early as 1890, J.P. Morgan had begun to assemble a large and haphazard collection of priceless works of art, old master drawings and prints, early printed books, and illuminated literary and historical manuscripts. Several years later, he would commission the architect Charles McKim of the architectural firm McKim, Mead and White to design and eventually build a library adjacent to his New York City residence located at Madison Avenue and 36th Street, which would become known as the Morgan Library. Designed as an Italian Renaissance-style palace with 3 magnificent rooms, J.P. Morgan's library was majestic yet intimate, and it was intended to serve as more than a repository for J.P. Morgan's rare materials. Knowing that his uncle needed the services of a librarian, Junius Spencer Morgan introduced Belle da Costa Green to J.P. Morgan in 1905. Impressed by her confident, witty personality and impressive knowledge of rare books and manuscripts, J.P. Morgan most likely was unaware of the fact that this light-skinned, attractive, vivacious, smart, and green-eyed woman was Black. He hired Belle da Costa Green to work for a salary of $35 more than she had been earning at Princeton University Library. Initially, Belle da Costa Green organized and cataloged Mr. Morgan's books. Later, she also served as J.P. Morgan's purchasing agent, oftentimes traveling abroad to identify and purchase manuscripts and rare books for her boss and his library. Eventually, more than 13 years after J.P. Morgan died, Belle da Costa Green was appointed as the first director of the Morgan Library in 1924, after J.P. Morgan's son Jack converted his father's personal library to an educational institution and museum. The Personal Librarian by Benedict and Murray covers Belle da Costa Green's early career as J.P. Morgan's librarian up until 1924. I can recommend this book for many reasons. Firstly, it presents the compelling, inspiring, amazing life story of a woman who aspired to achieve great things during her lifetime, but who had to give up a fundamental aspect of her identity, her race, in order to achieve a lasting legacy. Secondly, this book addresses many interwoven, still highly relevant themes, such as the roles of women in early 20th century America and Europe, the early civil rights movement in the United States, and the lifestyles of ultra-rich Americans. It also takes up the significant theme of passing, which helps to frame Belle de Costa Green's achievements within the context of her social and cultural worlds. Thirdly, I can recommend this book because while it's based upon an enormous amount of research and is very factual, it's still enjoyable to read, and it reads like a well-written, good novel that's filled with many true-to-life characters and personalities, some of whom were well-known museum directors, art dealers, connoisseurs, and other prominent individuals who functioned in Europe's social and cultural worlds. Written from Belle de Costa Green's viewpoint and taking place in significant cosmopolitan cities, including New York, London, Florence, and Venice. This book is a must-read for anyone who enjoys reading about well-known prominent persons, history, culture, and art. Readers who enjoy reading historical fiction, biographies, and travel writings also will find this book difficult to put down. Finally, as a librarian, I can recommend this book because book reviewers and critics have reviewed it very favorably. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm not going to share all the reviews with you, but I will mention a few. The critic writing for Publishers Weekly describes the book as a powerful take on the accomplishments of J.P. Morgan's librarian. The book reviewer for Booklist writes, every element of this blockbuster historical fiction is compelling and revelatory. It's a novel of enthralling drama, humor, sensuality, and insight. The critic for Library Journal states that the book is a fictional account of Green's life and that it feels authentic. Finally, the critic for the New York Journal of Books states that the book is both educational and entertaining, and it's the perfect example of creative nonfiction. There have been more critical reviews, but for the purposes of this presentation, I'm not going to mention them. If you liked this book, The Personal Librarian, then Broward County Library has many books in its collection on Belle de Costa Green and the Morgan Library. You may wish to consult An Illuminated Life by Heidi Ardizoni, which is considered the standard biography on Belle de Costa Green. Then there is a book entitled The Morgan Library, which describes the Morgan Library as an American masterpiece. Finally, you may wish to consult The Making of the Morgan by Paul Spencer Bayard. If you're interested in a reader-like, then you may want to read Passing by Nella Larson. The second book, which I would like to present and recommend, is by Anthony Amore, and it's entitled The Woman Who Stole Vermeer. In this nonfiction book, Amore sets forth the lost light of Bridget Rose Dugdale. Like Belle de Costa Green, Bridget Rose Dugdale lived an out-of-the-ordinary distinctive life, yet she lived one of a very different sort. Scholars and others have described Bridget Rose Dugdale variously as an outlier, revolutionary, and passionara, roles which rarely are associated with women and which rarely are used to describe them. So who was Bridget Rose Dugdale? Bridget Rose Dugdale, or Rose Dugdale as she became known, was born into a wealthy and privileged English family in March 1941. Her millionaire father, Colonel Eric Dugdale, was a successful insurance underwriter at Lloyd's of London, who owned a 600-acre estate in Devonshire known as Yardley Farm and a townhome in the affluent Chelsea area of London. Her mother, Carolyn, was divorced and remarried, and according to a friend, sought respectability and security in her second marriage. Bridget Rose Dugdale's upbringing was conventional and traditional by the standards of the wealthy post-war middle class in Britain. Not only was she brought up with a French governess, she also had servants and horses. Bridget Rose Dugdale was educated at private and very exclusive schools. She attended Miss Ironside's School for Girls in Kensington, and then after her early education, her parents sent her abroad to finishing schools in France, Germany, and Switzerland. After being presented in 1958 as a debutante before Queen Elizabeth II, she studied philosophy, politics, and economics at St. Anne's College, University of Oxford. Bridget Rose Dugdale then earned a master's degree in philosophy from Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts, and eventually a PhD in economics from Bedford College, University of London. Having worked for a while for the United Nations in New York and then at the Ministry of Overseas Development in the United Kingdom, she gradually became more involved with revolutionary politics and the Irish Republican movement in Northern Ireland, eventually becoming a volunteer in the Provisional Irish Republican Army. In The Woman Who Stole Vermeer, Anthony Amore describes the gradual radicalization of Bridget Rose Dugdale and her roles in crimes for which she was culpable and would become notorious, but for which she eventually managed to evade, initially managed to evade having to serve time in prison. Bridget Rose Dugdale's crimes included burglarizing the Dugdale family mansion in Devonshire on June 6, 1973, with 3 accomplices and stealing £82,000 worth of paintings, art, silver, and family heirlooms, a crime for which she was tried and found guilty, but for which the judge issued her a 2-year suspended sentence and a £5,000 fine. Bridget Rose Dugdale also hijacked a helicopter in Ireland on the 22nd of January, 1974, with 3 men associated with the Provisional Irish Republican Army in order to drop bombs made from milk churns that never exploded on the Royal Ulster Constabulary Police Station in Strabane, Northern Ireland. In this case, the judge sentenced Bridget Rose Dugdale to 9 years in a penitentiary. Her sentence ran concurrently with the crime for which she would become most widely famous, the second biggest art theft in Irish history. On the 26th of April, 1974, Bridget Rose Dugdale raided and robbed the stately house known as Rusborough House in County Wicklow, Ireland, which was owned by the British Conservative Party politician, art collector and philanthropist, and honorary Irish citizen, Sir Alfred Beit, and his wife, Lady Clementine. With 3 other IRA members, Bridget Rose Dugdale stole 19 old master paintings valued at 8 million Irish pounds, one of which included a rare and priceless masterpiece painted by the 17th century Baroque Dutch artist Johann Vermeer, entitled Woman Writing a Letter with Her Maid. It was this last crime for which Bridget Rose Dugdale would eventually be incarcerated. Yet she only was charged with receiving stolen goods and was not charged for being very well involved with the masterminding and execution of the robbery. On November 27, 1974, Bridget Rose Dugdale began to serve a 9-year prison sentence for her crime, and she was released from prison in October 1980. Anthony Amore's book is the first one to cover the criminal career of Bridget Rose Dugdale. I can recommend it to you for many reasons. Firstly, it provides an engrossing and thrilling character sketch of a woman who had it all. She had wealth, intelligence, the opportunity for a respectable career, and the potential to earn a good livelihood. But Bridget Rose Dugdale decided to give it all up to take up a political cause that befitted her strong beliefs and ambitions. Secondly, I can recommend this book because it shows how valuable and rare art masterpieces became bargaining chips to be used in exchange for various political demands. It's an excellent case study revealing how when the world's cultural property gets into the wrong hands, its fate becomes terribly imperiled. Thirdly, I can recommend this book because the author uses his expertise as director of security and chief investigator at the Gardner Museum in Boston to piece together the evidence for another art theft which remains unsolved. Amore links Bridget Rose Dugdale to the theft of another Vermeer painting, The Guitar Player. Vermeer's guitar player was stolen from Kenwood House outside London on February 23rd, 1974, and later it was recovered. But the thief or thieves who were involved were never apprehended. The Woman Who Stole Vermeer is a quick, thrilling read that's difficult to put down, and it's a must-read for art lovers, nonfiction readers, and others who enjoy reading crime thrillers and detective stories. Like The Personal Librarian by Benedict and Murray, you don't want to miss reading this book. Finally, as a librarian, I can recommend this book because many, if not most, of the critics have reviewed it quite favorably. Again, for the purposes of this presentation, I'm not going to share all the reviews with you, but I will mention a few. The critic for Kirkus review describes the book as a rollicking biography of a female art thief. The reviewer for Publishers Weekly writes that the book is thoroughly researched and that this research is matched by prose that keeps the reader turning the pages. Finally, the critic writing for Library Journal describes the book as both captivating and entertaining. He or she says that Amore provides effective context for Dugdale's radical actions and offers an examination of the significance of Vermeer's art that bolsters the sophistication of Dugdale's crimes. There have been more critical reviews, but in these cases, the reviews have also included many favorable comments. Take, for example, the critic writing for the Washington Post. Here she says that the book is a thorough correction of the Rose Dugdale story. Here she writes that the book clarifies Dugdale's seriousness and principles, pushing back against the superficial, adventure-seeking socialite label. If you like this book, then there are many books in Broward County libraries on the subject of art theft. You may be interested in reading Matthew Hart's Irish Game or The Museum of the Missing by Simon Hoop. There also is a book by John Borelli entitled Stealing the Show. Finally, if you're interested in a read-alike, then you may be interested in reading The Rescue Artist by Edward Dolnick. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you will read and enjoy these two books as much as I have. If you have any questions about these books and/or need assistance accessing them, then please telephone us at the library at 954-765-1560 or contact us by means of the library website or the Ask a Librarian service located at askalibrarian.org. We look forward to hearing from you and hope to see you in the library. Have a great day.